There is a moment on a red carpet when a family stops performing for the cameras and simply becomes human. It lasts only a few seconds. The smile falters. The voice catches. The eyes go somewhere far away, and everyone watching, whether they are standing 3 feet away with a microphone or sitting at home with a phone in their hand, feels it instantly. Because grief has a frequency that cuts through every layer of celebrity polish. That moment happened in early May of 2026 at one of the most glamorous conservation fundraisers in the world, and the family it happened to was the Irwins. Robert Irwin and Terri Irwin walked onto that event carpet looking every bit the picture of a family that has learned, over 20 years, how to carry enormous love and enormous loss at the same time. But when reporters asked about Bindi, when they pressed on the empty chair at the family table for the second consecutive year, something cracked open. Terri could not finish a thought without her voice going quiet. Robert turned away from one camera, and the smile that the whole world had come to love from 34 weeks of Dancing with the Stars simply disappeared for a moment. What the cameras captured that night is the subject of this video. But to understand it, we have to go back much further than a single gala. We have to go back to a decade of silence, a diagnosis that changed everything. 2 surgeries, 51 lesions, and a young woman who has been fighting one of the most misunderstood chronic illnesses in the world while also raising a daughter, running a zoo, and grieving a father she lost when she was 8 years old. This is what really happened. The 3rd annual Steve Irwin Gala was held inside the Bellagio Resort and Casino in Las Vegas on a warm Saturday evening in early May of 2026. The ballroom had been transformed with khaki tablecloths, live ambassador animals, and the kind of warm Australian energy that Steve himself seemed to generate wherever he walked. Australian comedian Rove McManus hosted the evening, and the room was packed with conservation donors, Hollywood supporters, and a significant contingent of the Dancing with the Stars community that had become part of Robert's extended family over the previous year. But from the moment the first guests arrived, people were asking the same question. Where was Bindi? Her absence was not a surprise to those who had been following the family closely. She had also been absent from the 2nd gala the year before, and that absence had come with a dramatic story of its own. But on this particular evening, with no emergency surgery to explain it, the question felt heavier, more personal. When Terri stepped in front of the cameras, she chose her words with the kind of care that only a mother who has spent years protecting her child in public truly understands. She told reporters that Bindi was doing better, that she was recovering, and that travel had become genuinely difficult for her at this particular point in her healing journey. She said Bindi would be there the following year, and she said it with the certainty of someone who desperately needs that to be true. Then came the sentence that nobody in the room fully processed until hours later, when social media had already pulled it apart and put it back together a dozen times. Terri smiled, that particular smile of hers that holds both warmth and weariness in equal measure, and said that it was actually less taxing for Bindi to stay home and feed the crocodiles than to make the long journey to Las Vegas. On the surface, it sounds like a joke. A classic Irwin family deflection through humor, the kind the family has always used to soften hard truths. But if you know what feeding crocodiles at Australia Zoo actually means, the sentence lands completely differently. The Crocoseum at Australia Zoo is a 5,500-seat arena. It was built by Steve Irwin himself. It is the same venue where his memorial was held in 2006. Feeding and working with the saltwater crocodiles there, animals that can grow to 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, is not a casual afternoon activity. It is physically and mentally demanding work that requires complete presence, complete focus, and a body that is functioning at a high level. When Terri said Bindi would rather do that than fly to Las Vegas, she was not making a small joke. She was telling the world, in the most Irwin way possible, that her daughter is fighting hard to reclaim her strength, and that even the act of feeding crocodiles is a sign of how far she has come, not how easy things are. Robert stepped in smoothly beside her, the way he always does, and added that someone had to hold the fort while the rest of the family traveled. He pointed out that Australia's zoo runs with around 500 staff across roughly 500,000 acres of conservation land. Bindi was doing a tremendous job at home, he said. He delivered it with a proud smile. But underneath that smile, anyone paying attention could hear what he was not saying. His sister is still in recovery. She is still fragile, and the family is doing what the Irwins have always done, protecting her, quietly, while facing the cameras with grace. To understand why Bindi's absence carried so much emotional weight at that gala, you have to understand the road she has traveled to get to where she is today. Bindi Irwin first spoke publicly about her endometriosis diagnosis in March of 2023. She shared a photograph from a hospital bed and wrote with extraordinary honesty about more than 10 years of pain, tests, specialist appointments, and scans that had repeatedly come back without answers. For over a decade, she had been living inside a body that was fighting against itself, and for much of that time, she had been doing it in front of cameras, in public, with a smile, because that is what she had been raised to do. Her first surgery, performed by celebrated specialist Dr. Tamer II in New York, removed 37 endometriosis lesions and a chocolate cyst that had physically attached her ovary to her side. 37. The number alone communicates how advanced and aggressive her condition had become by the time she received her diagnosis. But endometriosis does not simply go away after surgery. It is a chronic condition. It returns, and in the spring of 2025, it returned in a way that made everything the family had dealt with before look manageable by comparison. The night of the second annual Steve Irwin Gala, the 2025 event, Bindi was supposed to be there. She had planned to attend. She had made the journey. And then, hours before she was meant to step onto the carpet, everything collapsed. Her surgeon told her plainly that her appendix had to come out immediately. There was no discussion, no negotiation. Her health had to come first. She flew directly from Las Vegas to New York for emergency surgery. And in what might be one of the most Bindi Irwin things that has ever happened, less than an hour after the surgery ended, she filmed a video from her hospital bed for her followers. She was pale. She was exhausted. But she looked directly into the camera and told the world exactly what had happened. Her appendix had been removed. 14 additional endometriosis lesions had been found and excised during the same procedure. A hernia from giving birth to her daughter, Grace Warrior, had been repaired. When you add those numbers to the lesions removed in her first surgery, the total reaches 51 endometriosis lesions across 2 operations. Along with those, she had also lost her appendix and had a postpartum hernia corrected. The physical toll of that medical history is almost impossible to comprehend for someone who has not lived it. And Bindi Irwin lived all of it while also being a mother, a conservationist, a public figure, and a daughter grieving a father who died when she was still a child. By August of 2025, she was finally beginning to share genuine progress with her followers. She wrote that she could get through ordinary days without wanting to pass out from the pain. She said she was starting to recognize herself again. That sentence, starting to recognize herself, carries everything. It tells you how completely the illness had taken her from herself, and it tells you how hard she had been working to come back. That recovery is the thing Terri was protecting when she chose her words so carefully on the carpet in 2026. Bindi was not simply unavailable. She was healing, and the family was giving her the space to do that, even when every camera in the room wanted to know why the chair was empty. To understand the full emotional landscape of the Irwin family right now, you also have to look at what Robert experienced during his season of Dancing with the Stars, because that journey spanning 11 weeks of late 2025 revealed things about this family that even years of watching them on camera had not fully shown. Week 5 of the 34th season was titled Dedication Night. Every celebrity on the show performed a routine dedicated to someone important in their life. Robert chose his mother. He sat on the couch in the rehearsal studio and tried to talk through his tears. He explained that he had been just 2 years old when his father died, and that, as he had grown older, he had come to understand in a much deeper way what it must have cost his mother to hold everything together, the family, the zoo, the conservation legacy, the grief, while making it look like something close to normal for her 2 children. He said that at every major milestone in his life, where he had wished his father could be there, his mother had been there instead. The routine he and his professional partner Whitney Carson performed was a contemporary piece set to the Phil Collins song from the Tarzan soundtrack. At the climax, Terri walked onto the dance floor in a yellow dress. Robert lifted her. He twirled her, and then he collapsed into her arms as the music swelled, and the judges at their table were openly wiping their eyes. In the rehearsal footage that aired before the performance, Terri herself broke down on camera. She told producers that after losing Steve, finding a reason to smile again had taken a very long time. She said that for Robert to say she had lifted him up felt backwards to her, because the truth was that her children were the only reason she had been able to get out of bed at all in the years after 2006. That is not the kind of thing a person says for cameras. That is a truth that gets said, because it has finally been held long enough that it needs to come out. A few weeks after dedication night came the show's 20th anniversary episode, and with it, an assignment that the entire Irwin family felt deeply. Robert and Whitney were given Bindi's own winning freestyle from season 21, her 2015 victory, to recreate. That routine had been danced to Leona Lewis's footprints in the sand, and Bindi had dedicated it to her late father. The weight of that assignment is almost poetic in its cruelty and its beauty at the same time. Robert was being asked to dance to the same song, in honor of the same man, in the same ballroom where his sister had danced a decade earlier. At the end of the performance, Bindi herself walked onto the floor. She joined Robert and Whitney in an embrace. As they held hands, projected images of Steve Irwin holding a baby Robert appeared on the floor beneath their feet. Robert dropped to his knees in the middle of the ballroom. He was completely overcome. The judges gave that performance a perfect score, 40 out of 40, the first perfect score of the entire season. Derek Hough, choking up at the judges' table, called Robert the generation's beacon of joy. Bruno Tonioli said Steve was looking down and smiling. Robert won the Mirrorball Trophy in late November of 2025. The finale drew more than 9 million viewers. Voting reached 72 million ballots. He became the youngest male winner in the show's history. And with that win, he and Bindi became the first pair of siblings ever to both hold Mirrorball trophies in the history of Dancing with the Stars. When Alfonso Ribeiro read his name as the winner, Robert's first words were about his sister. He told the crowd that Bindi had said the show would change his life forever, and she had been right. Terri was in the audience that night. Bindi was in the audience. So was Chandler Powell, Bindi's husband, and 4-year-old Grace Warrior. The Irwin table was complete, and for a few minutes in a Los Angeles ballroom, everything they had all carried for 20 years seemed to lift just slightly. Back on the carpet in Las Vegas in 2026, reporters from Access Hollywood asked Robert and Terri the question that has followed the family since September 4, 2006. What would Steve think if he could see all of this? Terri answered first, and her answer was vintage Terri, sharp and a little dry, with something genuine underneath. She said Steve would have been genuinely amazed to find himself in Las Vegas of all places. She noted that people tend to underestimate how philanthropic that city actually is, how much the work done there ripples outward into humanitarian and conservation causes that touch the entire world. Robert's answer was quieter and more personal. He said that every single day somewhere in the world, a stranger approaches him to share a story about how his father changed their life. 20 years later, that is not the kind of legacy that happens by accident. It happens because the message was real, and it has continued to grow, Robert said, because of one person's determination to keep it alive. He looked at his mother as he said it. Terri's response to that was the kind of line only she could deliver. She told the reporters that the one thing Robert had going for him that Steve never did was a complete willingness to take his shirt off in the name of wildlife. The carpet laughed. And then, in the quiet after the laughter, Terri said something that stayed with people. She said the road from 2006 to that moment had held a great deal of grief and a great deal of work, but also times of tremendous joy, and that both things were true at the same time. Just 4 months after that Met Gala in Las Vegas, the Irwin family will face the 20th anniversary of Steve Irwin's death. September 4, 2026. 20 years since the Stingray barb at Bat Reef. The entire conservation world has that date marked. The family certainly does. Robert spoke about his own grief, in a way that felt remarkably honest during a CNN podcast with Anderson Cooper earlier in the year. He said he feels closest to his father when he is deep in the wilderness on a crocodile research expedition, and a